Well, it was not a terribly great day for Tesla's shareholders today, Brian Wang, and I know you're one of them.
Yes.
So, so, so there's a bunch of possible reasons. I was just reading before we went on air that at least one pundit is saying that it's because the shareholders were a little shocked by low sales in Europe. So this seemed to have been maybe the second leg. The first
Mhm.
leg down this morning might have been kind of the Elon effect with regard to all of his visibility in Washington, D.C. right now, not
Mhm.
all of which is positive. It's positive if you're the right party, but it's negative if you're the wrong party. And so it seemed like maybe the first leg was kind of that, but the second leg might have been these numbers coming in from Europe, showing some very, very low sales in January. So what have you heard or seen so far today with regard to Tesla?
I think um, Europe's in a virtual recession, right? That basically, I think overall, new cars in general are down for Europe, if I'm not mistaken, and the used car prices have collapsed over there. So basically, then if you needed a car, you can get a decent used car and don't have to buy a new car. So I think, because of their bad economy, things are bad. So I don't see necessarily why that would be a huge reason to um, sell Tesla stock. But, on a technical basis, not being over 414, the old high, or not being over 420 is not a good sign for Tesla. But there is a lot of support down here. So there's several levels. Okay, we hit 380 multiple times, hit, under 380, 370 something, and going to 360, 350 is, very possible. But in terms of a prolonged um, downward move, I don't see that, presuming that the things that we're expecting to see happen, new car released in the first half of the year, a continuing ramp of the Model Y, the Megapack factory starting next week in Shanghai, a third factory being built there. The Megapacks should increase to at least 20 gigawatt hours per quarter, right? By the end of this year, Q3, Q4. I
Yep.
think Larry Goldberg has forecasted that. It could go even better. Like if the factory ramp happened even faster than that, could get to 25 to 30 gigawatt hours, which would be could be on the order of 1.5 to $2 billion per quarter of profit from energy, which would be good growth even if somehow the EVs were flat. And then of course we have FSD, vastly improving, coming out a new version, better, safer than human, in the middle of the year with June paid robotaxi starting in Austin.
Well, let's back up. Um, let's start with the I have all these distractions right now. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So let's start with the technical aspect. So Randy is not a technical analyst. He has Randy's method. And
Mhm.
so I've been saying that I think trading would be between 360 and 480 until we have news. And
Right.
I don't mean the starting of the Megapack factory in Shanghai. I mean
Right.
uh, the unsupervised or robotaxi,
FSD in China, FSD in Europe
a really
permitted,
amazing video about
licensing.
this,
Yeah.
or maybe
Yeah.
he's talking now, having a conversation, like 3CPO. So there's real news, but if there's no
Mhm.
real news, I think we're stuck between 360 and 480. Now that's Randy's kind of floor and ceiling based on the old uh, uh, high of the day, not the intraday high, but the final number for the day at 380, 480 rather. And the 360 is kind of, there was a bunch of little stopping points between 300 and 380. I think we kind of finished a little under today, like 378 and a half.
Yeah.
Um, and we finished on the low. So could we be going back down? So that's kind of how I think of it. But you
Yeah.
have way more sophisticated stuff that you look at. So what are you thinking?
So there is a lot of support at 380. We've held that multiple times. Um, the market has not totally crapped itself, in terms of like QQQ or SPY or something like that, right? So if that happened, then we break below 380 substantially, can go to 360, even down to 300, right? So if people freak out, the market freaks out, everyone's really unhappy with what's going on, you know, getting down to 300 is not impossible, right? So um, Tesla needs to have more news. If we don't, then we're kind of like in an air pocket where things can just like fall out like that. But like I said, the reasons that we do expect some level of decent news and would be if you've been holding for a while, if you're not a trader, then if you know, okay, we're going to have unsupervised robotaxis in June, and we're going to have a new car by middle of the year, first half, right?
Yep, yep,
Then why would you be selling now?
yep.
It's just like, oh, I don't, Shanghai factory is about to open, back in 2018, 2019, or whatever like that. We're releasing the Model Y and we're gonna get the Model 3 and something like that. So you kind of like you're at that point and then you're being hit with the bear stories, but like the good time is about to come. And then suddenly you say, okay, because the stock went down another 10%, that's it. I can't hold it.
Right.
So it
Yeah. So
doesn't, yeah,
and so that becomes, I mean, Elon has said it over and over again. If you don't believe in robotaxi, don't buy.
right,
If you don't believe, and he's not even talking to Optimus at that point. He's just
right.
saying, if you don't believe in robotaxi, if you don't believe that we're going to do it, well, then don't participate,
Yeah.
because that is going to be the company, and that is, from my standpoint, again, as a fundamental guy, even though, maybe you have to say I'm a fundamental guy who also believes in the story. Okay.
Mhm. Right.
Without the story, the stock is worth $200.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just talking about bending metal,
Yeah.
I think I'd have a hard time justifying $200.
Right.
It would have to be based on energy. If you could
Right.
push the energy thing up a bit, then you could say, yeah, the stock's worth $200 without the story.
Right. Right.
But but to get past $200 right now, when you're flat, when
Yeah.
your profits are flat, how are you going to justify more than that? So basically, the story is, to me, it's a two-parter. One is robotaxi, June, July, August. Looks like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Unsupervised is part of that. So those are two big different profit lines, because if
Right.
we unsupervised, the FSD sales should go through the roof, and that's pure profit. And then you got robotaxi, which is another, just, so those two lines, huge amounts. Part two of the story is Optimus, which is supposed to be on the factory floor soon and available for sale sometime next year.
Right.
That is a $25
Trillion.
trillion business. I'm sorry, mega market cap, according
Yeah.
to Elon. Elon bought Cathie Wood's story that the robotaxi business was worth 7 trillion, and then Cathie Wood has upped her number.
Right.
So
Right.
so now, okay, so we got a $25 trillion business, and we
Yeah.
got a $7 trillion business.
Yeah.
And people are going, oh, well, sales are a little soft this quarter. I'm like,
Mhm.
what are you even talking about? Talk to me
Right.
though about Cathie Wood's latest latest analysis.
The analysis of robotaxi at 7 trillion or something like that. The assumption is that you're replacing what is currently available. It's like saying Nokia is selling 200 million cell phones in 2020, and then iPhone's going to come along, and we're going to say they'll sell 200 million iPhones, and they'll be selling them at $200 per phone, similar to what Nokia has done, or maybe $300, $400 per phone, right? So, and then you say that's their business, and thus we say that they're worth this much. But then, in actual fact, smartphone sales went up 10 times, 20 times, and then each one was more valuable at like, 500 to $1,000 per phone, even sometimes 1,500, $2,000 per phone. And they generate more revenue from apps and the App Store and services, right? So everything became bigger. So the estimate of robotaxi at $7 trillion, or if you upped it to 10 trillion, is based upon the world as it exists switches over to that mile for mile, payment for payment over to this other world, right? But it is not a world where, well, if I can
So,
move things,
but by that you mean it would take out Uber, it would take out Lyft, it would take out Waymo,
taxis,
it would take out, yes,
home, normal usage of cars that people
taxis,
own.
taxis,
Right,
etc. Okay, yeah, okay,
right. But that the people's behavior does not change.
right,
Right? That all the people, seniors who weren't moving around because they didn't feel safe driving or doing whatever, right? Suddenly can now just hop into a vehicle. So then the usage increases by 30% because people who weren't moving around not only can afford to do it, but it's safe and easy for them to do it because they're not driving themselves, right? And then me moving goods around was I'm only doing it when I need to. I'm putting it into my car and I'm moving. I'm renting a U-Haul and I'm moving it, right? But if I have this world where I'm just things are being loaded in, I'm just calling stuff up. The shopping that came from Amazon,
mhm,
because now I can e-commerce shop and get things delivered to my home, is has increased. But if I have dropped everything by 10, 20% because I've taken out supply chain cost and friction, right? Then the actual the new supply demand thing could suddenly be twice as high, right? Because because these costs so that can shift the calculation. And then that doesn't even get into entirely new use cases that were impossible now that become possible with a cheap robotaxi world.
right. So then she's now looking at thinking that the TAM actually the market valuation
Mhm.
would be 34 trillion. The combination of all ride-hail autonomous vehicles would be 34 trillion, and she thinks that Tesla, and that's Western world only. That does
Mhm.
not include China, India, even the Philippines. I mean, just Western nations would be
Mhm.
34 trillion would be the market cap for the ride-hail business as of 2030. Not
Right,
2035, not 2040, 2030,
right,
based on 50 million vehicles.
right.
And she thinks Tesla could easily put out, or was it Tesla 50 million and other people another 50 million, or I can't remember,
I think she had Tesla market share at 50%, but
50%. So maybe that'd be 25 million for Tesla then, roughly.
trillion, 20 trillion, yeah, yeah,
No, 25 million vehicles for
oh,
Tesla.
20 million vehicles, yeah, yeah,
Right, which they could
right,
easily do by 2030. Okay,
yeah,
so that's her thesis, which would give Tesla a market cap not of 7 trillion by then, but of 17 trillion by 2030.
Mhm.
Make sense to you?
It makes sense. But it's just like the ARK investing like 5 years ago made the call that Tesla would be $6,000 per share without accounting in the splits and stuff that happened, which is basically when they hit $400, which happened,
Right.
right? Um, so, but we all know living through it that if things had gone better, that Tesla could have done even more,
Yeah.
right? That if there wasn't a worldwide pandemic, if there wasn't, some slowdowns in 4680 battery production, we could have been, another double,
Right.
right? So in some ways, it's like Kathy's pricing in a conservative, base case, that this is what happens, even allowing for stuff not to quite go right because things can go really good and can go even better, right? So she's not like saying maximum performance. It's kind of like a a reasonable good scenario achievable with 25 million cars. Like if you're using Tesla bots to make cars and have this other production, you could get to 10, 20 million
Right.
cars per year. And then you could have 100 million robotaxis by 2030. Not inconceivable they could ramp to that number. But it's the kind of thing where Kathy's already multiples beyond where everyone else is. And so she can, make the changes. Okay, yeah, we hit it 2 years early, and now I'll up my number, right? But she's willing to go out at least, 2, 3 years, 5 years to think about what could happen.
All right, now let's throw cold water on the whole thing. Let's look at what Brian White came up with the other day, where he had these videos that he did with. I'm always forgetting the name of that videographer that YouTuber that he did the show with, that went over to China and took a look at some of the Chinese FSD capability right now,
Right.
and the capability was quite good.
Yeah.
So you've been the expert, the only expert really in our community, looking at the Chinese like Baidu and whatnot and what they're doing over there. And they've got a lot of mileage. They got a lot of cars out there and a lot of miles, even if they are being remotely controlled. It looks like some new capability now with at least one or two manufacturers. Now, maybe they're all using the same software. We don't know, but they're giving some pretty good results that are not remote controlled. So we could be looking at Gary Black could end up being right, and we could be looking at a 2 or 3 player world. I said on my show this morning, I'm perfectly happy with 25%, Tesla having 25% instead of 50%. And what do you think?
Well, one, the value, the TAM of the market, even though there's more vehicles over in China, right? The price per vehicle, because their salaries are 4 times, 5 times less,
Right.
then you end up with they're already at 50 cents per mile for ride hailing, for taxi and those kinds of
Right.
things, right? Versus a $2 here, right? So the you know they're going to robotic automation and vehicles with a more expensive vehicle, because even with their lower priced LiDAR and that kind of stuff, it's still several $1,000s for the system. They still have $50,000, $40,000 vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Not including any software, any service, just for the vehicle itself,
Right.
right? Versus the potential for a cybercab being at $25,000 plus whatever you charge for the software and that kind of thing, right? So, and then in terms of them entering the U.S. market, that's an issue, based on the current political
Sure.
situation, right?
Sure.
So, um,
So in other
you
words,
know,
you would give them half of the Chinese market, or
right.
even more. You wouldn't care. It'd be okay with you if they have half the Chinese market, especially if it's already going to be at 25 cents. Or
Yeah, I'm again, they have to show that they can scale it,
right,
right?
right.
Like, so if they say, okay, like someone goes test it out, drives it, well, that means if they have wonderful economics, they should scale to 100 cities. They were
Right.
talking about scaling to
Right.
50 cities or whatever, and the amount of driving miles,
Mhm.
paid driving miles, should shoot up to 1 billion miles,
Mhm.
right? ARK Invest not showing that. No one else is showing that, right? That they're shooting up to that. They haven't. I think that gentleman who I saw, Brian White interview, was saying he was having trouble finding them without safety drivers, right?
Now, is that the same one? Because this is not the robo taxi one. This is one where he was actually driving vehicles that had FSD
Driver assist, right, right, right.
driver
I
assist.
thought he'd done checked them both out.
Oh,
Um,
maybe he did. I did. I only
Maybe
saw
a
one
separate
of the
video.
videos.
So,
I
yeah,
didn't watch both. Yeah.
but so if they have done it, right? The issue is then one, it wouldn't be just one person, the one guy that Brian White interviewed, and you know um, the 𝐓𝐡𝐮𝐬𝐝𝐚𝐲 capital. Um, um, I'm trying to remember, I'm blanking on her name right now. Um, um, Going over there to do some tests, it would be like far more, and they'd be hitting all over. They'd be big press releases saying, "Hey, we're going to 50 cities, we're going to 10,000 vehicles, and all that kind of stuff." Because Tesla's saying, "Okay, by next year we're going to go US wide,"
Mhm.
right? So if that happens, then and we'll go to, like 1 million vehicles, then they need to scale quickly, right? If they're going to get their share, right? Because if we get FSD approval into China, which is just an issue of resolving something about like China wants all the training data to be, all the video data to be in China, and the US doesn't want to allow that. So there has to be some kind of like, how do we do it in a way that satisfies both sides? Then Tesla's in, right? And it seems like China wants them in, and it seems like Elon should be able to negotiate that point. So, but if they don't, if they say, okay, geopolitically, whatever, we're going to keep it separate, then by definition, whatever robotaxi market would be in China would be China's.
Right,
So,
right. So, and again, I think the U.S. market is the big opportunity. So the only competition here is Waymo. Everybody's like, okay, Waymo is so far ahead and everything else, but then if you start, and people have done a little bit of this, we're talking about Google here. We're not talking about a company that doesn't have resources,
yeah,
that can't do some technology. I mean, obviously they can do some technology, but even if Google tomorrow somehow using those Chinese sources, using their own capabilities, using NVIDIA, whatever it is, they somehow were able to catch up in terms of the FSD. They're so far from catching up on the vehicle. And then we have that new report coming out 2 days ago that Tesla can do 200,000 miles average. You shouldn't even worry about it. 200,000, that's like normal. And
mhm,
the next best electric vehicle was 170,000, and the next
right,
best ICE vehicle was like 150,000. So if you're
right,
talking about a robocab, now your
right,
depreciation, not your actual depreciation, not your tax depreciation, but your
right.
actual depreciation over the life of the car is a 20-year depreciation. That means you're only depreciating it like $1,000 a year or less.
If you're driving a robotaxi 100,000 miles a year,
Yeah,
right, which is, kind of the
possible.
vision, that means if you only have a life of your vehicle for 200,000 miles, in 2 years,
It's done.
you either have to junk the car or you have to overhaul it with new batteries and new whatever else, right? So your maintenance cost, your actual operational cost would be far higher, right? So yeah, that goes to actually solving the full problem means we need to have 500,000 mile, 1 million mile vehicles.
Right.
And those would be worth it to have the long life, the actual durability, the actual low maintenance on the vehicle.
Right. And that's what Tesla, of course, is building the Cybercab around. And they're the only ones that we know of right now. Well, now there's a Baidu. Is it a Baidu? Somebody's building that six-passenger kind of a little minivan type looking thing, which is
Mhm.
supposed to be dedicated to the future, Cybercab world. But the only two-seater, the only one that I think is really, really being what would you call it? What do they call it? Green? A blank slate, uh,
A
uh,
greenfield,
greenfield, the
yeah,
only greenfield vehicle that's
yeah,
really being built from the ground up, I think is the Cybercab.
right, right. So basically, I need to see some other company saying, okay, I got 10,000 vehicles, robotaxi that I'm rolling out this year
Right,
to whatever many cities I'm doing, and they're gonna have like 100 million miles. So instead of like 9 million miles total last year for Waymo, I need to see someone going to 100 million miles this year. And then say, and next year we're going to 100,000 plus vehicles and 1 billion miles. If someone says that, and I'm saying, okay, now you're a competitor,
right.
right?
Yes.
If you don't
Well,
do that,
well, Tesla's
I'm
going to 1 million or two.
right. It doesn't go to 1 million or two, which if I'm doing, 20,000 miles on it would be, if at 1 million, that'd be like 20 billion miles,
Right,
right? So that's the level that I'm saying that's a full deployed rollout, right?
right. All right, so let's switch over from robotaxi. I think that is definitely, the future of Tesla. Before we get to Optimus, we're not going to talk about Optimus today. We'll probably maybe hit that over the weekend, but because well, you said you had a couple of things to say about Optimus from the report. Did you, from Kathy Wood's arc?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That basically, I can see it becoming cheaper. We can discuss those things later. I don't have the
Okay.
full
Okay. All
analysis
right. Well,
done ready.
maybe over the weekend we'll do that. So what I do, the other thing I do want to talk about though is in terms of the fundamentals of the near term for Tesla.
Mhm.
We've talked about, okay, it's a story stock. That's the story that's coming up later. We talked about it from the standpoint of being down today, maybe because of, European sales being down a little bit or tariffs or, there's a lot of possibilities there. But then we've got this kind of fly in the ointment problem, which people like to talk about from time to time of Elon Musk and his political involvement. And I know that you and I are on the same page politically. I'm not looking for us to just agree with each other. But Elon has, here's my scenario, and I'll let you jump in anytime you want to. Elon has gone to Washington, D.C. with zero, I'm sorry, with this much interest in how it impacts Tesla. Maybe he's hoping to get a better deal out of NISTA, okay, to get a better deal about unsupervised cars and robotaxis eventually. By doing all this, he might get a better deal. That might be kind of sort of over here somewhere. But the reality is, because I just have watched him now for too long and too deeply, I just take him at his word because that's it always turns out to be true. And maybe because he's autistic, he doesn't know how to lie. Is that he's like, no, I'm going there because I believe in the United States. I'm a red, white, and blue guy. I'm a flag flying guy, and I don't want to see the United States go down the tubes. And right now, it's going down the tubes because
Yeah.
of this this massive, massive budget that is $2 trillion in deficit, which is driving up interest rates. So, how do you see that?
Yeah. Everyone keeps, before this current administration and before the Doge situation, we were adding and still are adding $1 trillion of debt every 100 days, right? So we had $2 trillion of debt last year off of just shy of $7 trillion of spending. Um, so, taxing it at $5 trillion. And everyone kept saying this is unsustainable. And they were expecting an eventual financial collapse of the United States, hyperinflation, all that kind of stuff. In a hyperinflation world, you're not selling many cars. You know, if you would like to use a car to move your wheelbarrow full of worthless currency, but you wouldn't be able to afford the gas to do it. So avoiding that is actually a good thing, right? That if that was the path that we were on,
Mhm.
um, and everyone kept looking, okay, every year we're adding more and more thing. We're at 37 trillion of debt, all that kind of stuff. We're at $880 billion worth of interest, right? So, just things were not sustainable. So you had to turn that around. So, just like, all the censorship, other things were things that were not um, leading the United States or the world to a good place. And so now this has to be solved. So that means, being harsh to um, get rid of, reduce the staffing levels from 3 million some full-time staff plus 10 to 20 million contractors, um, and spending all that huge money. But if you look at it in terms of like, how much do we really need to spend? Was government that constrained under Bill Clinton in 1997? How different is the world from that point? It was $1.6 trillion back then. And then even adjusting for inflation, it's like 3.1 trillion. Add on $800 billion for interest or $900 billion for interest, you have $4 trillion.
Not
So
seven.
not seven. So then that 2.7 trillion is a bunch of extra stuff that what did we get out of it? What are we getting in the government that we weren't, we got our military, we got our Social Security, we had our Medicare, all that stuff existed under Bill Clinton. And we didn't like ramp it up and we're like, oh, now we got benefits. You had COLA adjustments for people. It's not like you got a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So just by that logical thing, what is this extra $2.7 trillion going towards? Why do we need it? And the thing is, even just rolling it back to 2019, just before, it's under Trump, it's before the the before COVID, but COVID came and went, so whatever that was, it's now out, right? So then we were spending, like $4.4 trillion, right? Off of, taking some in with a deficit. So, and again, it's like, okay, we're 30% higher inflation, plus we have more interest rate. But again, you have this extra $1 trillion, it's like going nowhere, right? So to people say, and we can't cut it. Why? Why can't we cut it? We can add it in, but just because I suddenly labeled them something of like they're doing something, and then this U.S. aid thing, where they're saying, okay, $20 million was spent to send Angelina Jolie to the Ukraine, right? $8 million was sent to send Sean Penn or other people to Ukraine, and they were spending money on trans concerts and I think, Bill Gates says, okay, well, if you cut U.S. aid $44 billion per year, that will cause millions to die from starvation
Right.
and from not having vaccines,
Right.
right? Well, one only less than 2 trillion is spent on food aid from USAID, and less than 2 trillion was spent on vaccines. That's 4 trillion. So what's the
40.
other 36 trillion for? And then or 40 trillion, 40 billion, and then the United States charitable spending is about charitable donations is over $500 billion,
Mm.
right? And individuals, you and me and everyone else, total up to about $360 billion.
Mhm.
So we can't cut $4 billion for more food aid that we need. And where is the food aid going to? It's going to Somalia, Haiti, Sudan. Those guys have budgets and they seem to be spending a bunch of money shooting each other and
Right.
other people or doing other things. So they can't spend money to feed themselves. They can buy the food. It's around. So anyway, I I think that it's absolutely necessary for us to turn the government budgets around, and it will be then good for Tesla because if we fix the interest rate problem, the spending problem fixes the interest rate problem, fixes inflation, and then without inflation, the vehicle cost goes down to, financing vehicle goes from like 7% down to 4%, and everything's good, right? And also, if if there's a golden age where everyone's richer in the United States, again, more vehicles are purchased. So he's going to sneakily make us all richer and better and have good government so that we have money to spend on cars,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah, it's kind of a knock-on effect. It wasn't the reason for doing it in the first
Right.
place. So let's talk then about the specifics because the stock went down, 14 points today. And what happened over the last 24 hours is that they're rioting. Well, they're not rioting. I don't want to exaggerate. They're all worked up, and there are now demonstrations around the USAID building. There's demonstrations around the Treasury building. There's demonstrations in California on the 101 freeway, whatever it was, one of the freeways. Because of the people going back to Mexico, and there's all these demonstrations, and there's all these senators and congressmen out there getting plenty of airtime, shouting and waving their fists because Elon Musk is an unelected, un unsupervised. He's out of control. He's able to decide that grandma won't get her social security check, and he's just a horrible person. And he's an oligarch. He's an
Yeah.
oligarch, according to
Mhm.
Bernie Sanders. He loves the word oligarch. I think he just likes the way it rolls off his tongue. Anyway, he's
Mhm.
so we have all these people that are now mimicking this same nonsense. And
Mhm.
Elon's polling numbers are down today. I think he's polling, he's favorabilities are down like 37% or something. And Trump's
Mhm.
at 51. So go
Right.
figure.
Yeah.
So, which everybody's shocked that he's at 51. So is this a temporary? Do you think that he's violating the law by all the things that he's doing, or some of the things that he's doing? Because
If
that's what.
if he was violating the law, they'd be all over it. They would actually be suing and have a case, right? Um, you know, they're going to try and impeach Trump, but that has to get through the House. In order for there to be investigation, it's not going to go through the House. In terms of, yeah, so it's not illegal what they're doing. Um, you know, again, if they weren't careful enough to keep it all legal, then they'll be stopped.
Yeah.
So they can come up with a lawsuit and then make it go. Um, they can they can try and get it to a Delaware judge and maybe, like
Right.
really, or a New York judge and, have that really go for them. But I don't believe anything illegal. If it was, then they'd be able to do something to stop it because plenty of people are pushing back. They knew that when they did all the cuts, plenty of people would be pushing back on this thing. Um, but in terms of, I think like, again, USAID, $44 billion, it's a bunch of unelected people. I didn't elect someone to say, hey, I'm campaigning on giving $20 million to Angelina Jolie to go to Ukraine, right?
To make Zelensky more attractive to the American public.
Right, right.
That was the
Yeah.
reason.
So yeah, no one elected made those announcements about all that spending. They didn't say, hey, we're going to have USAID give $40 million to the Wuhan lab in 2019, right? It's like, that seems really crazy. How is that saving lives? Because we had to understand the bat coronavirus in 2019
Yes. Yes.
before that other thing
Yes.
happened. So I think, as Elon said, there was no Apple in USAID, right? And it was a lot of the money, like money going to, $8 million to Politico, or $13 million to Politico, $3 million to BBC, $3 million to New York Times. Like, how was that saving lives? And how was that US aid? I'm giving money to the BBC News and to Politico, obviously just propaganda. So it was, a lot of it was for, CIA, deep state things. And they were not elected. None of them were elected. So the thing about like non-elected, like they have an agency which was um, digital services, providing software to improve the efficiency, software consulting to improve the efficiency and the productivity of the US.
Right.
So they relabeled that Doge. So it was like, this was the thing. We're calling it Doge, the same purpose and function. It's just that they're pushing it harder. They're doing
Right.
more with it.
Right.
So thus
So
it's
apparently that is the legal basis because people were, well, how come he was originally brought in as a commission, then he was changed to a part-time employee, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turns out that as they were doing the legals and trying to make sure that this was all done right, they decided that the smartest way, or the wisest way to do this was to use an existing agency, which the president has every right to be able to change, to take an agency that is
the goals, yeah,
an
and how you do.
executive agency, not a congressional agency, but an executive agency, and then change the roles, change a little bit of the description of what it does, but it was basically accomplishing the same task.
Right.
So that's how they justify it. It doesn't look to me, I mean, sure, lawyers get a hold of it and they can, everybody can have a field day and decide what's right, what's wrong. The question I have though, Brian, is have you been able to figure out yet? I've been asking on X for 2 days now and I haven't been able to figure it out. Can you figure out yet why they don't want these cuts?
Which cuts?
All the cuts. Why are they fighting the cuts?
Oh,
Wouldn't they
it's
want the same thing as we do? Wouldn't they want to reduce the amount of the deficit, which will cause the bond market to get happy and reduce the treasury note rate, which will then reduce my credit card bill and my future car payment, my future mortgage. Isn't that good for everybody?
I think that they are invested in the system as it currently stands. That they, get money support, like having a stronger BBC and New York Times and Politico means that they get the Democrat message out, right? Because those BBC, all those things, NPR, they all get, are promoting the messages that they want to have. And the fact that there's other waste, they didn't look at it before and they don't want to look at it now, and they just want things to continue. And having it investigated, there could be trails leading back to certain people where they don't want that to occur. So, thus they're saying that they don't want that to happen. I think some of the money from various things goes, to the Chuck Schumers of the world, et cetera, and Bernie gets
Possible.
some
It's
money.
possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was Larry telling me last night that they had this chart that they showed. I should have posted it. some kind of a chart where you have the money going to this agency and this agency, and then they split the money out and it
Mhm.
goes to these 12 agencies. And then those 12 agencies send them, this is under USAID. And then those 12 agencies split it out and it ends up going to like 40 different agencies. And then the money goes back and it goes to this one resource. All the money has gone through, been filtered out through also, and without paying for any food or paying for any drugs or paying for any resources or anything else, it ends up back at this one facility at the end. And it reminded me of many movies I've seen that had
Right.
something to do with, I don't know, laundering or something. I don't know.
Right. Right. So with all that money flowing around, a lot of people are being paid off, and a lot of people want to be paid off. And even if it's not going directly into a politician's pocket,
Right.
right, they are getting elected because of it. So there was a senator who was in Alabama for many, many years, Shelby, I think it was. I think he just quit in 2023, but he was there for like, 20, 30 years, about that. And he was always controlling NASA's budget, right? So, so even though it may not be personally going to him, he was making sure that there was $2.5–3 billion spent in Alabama and the facilities that NASA had
Right.
for Space Launch System. Space Launch System is reconfiguring space shuttle parts into an Apollo stack. So Space Shuttle existed, 1980s, and they said, "Oh, we shouldn't have it shaped like a space shuttle. We should have it shaped like an Apollo stack." Go to the 70s. So they've been trying to do that for 30 some years with the exact same engine parts that they've been trying to do that, right? So they had a constellation program under Bush 2, and that failed. They had a first test, launch test, and it just total crap. So they said, okay, let's try again. So they got Space Launch System. So add up Constellation, Space Launch, and the Orion, the capsule that goes into Space Launch System, and the ground stuff. You're looking at about $60 billion. They've had one launch of Artemis that they just did that would, the first uncrewed launch
Yeah.
of that thing. 30 years, $60 billion to get to that point, right? Which is not, dissimilar from the amount of spending that they had for Space Shuttle, which cost $200 billion for 135 launches,
Right.
right? $1.6 billion per launch, right? So as much as I love Space Shuttle, it was an incredible waste,
Right.
right? And then a space station, $150 billion for that. So you're spending insane amount of money that you don't need to spend to actually achieve something. Like add it all up, NASA. I'm not picking on NASA and space stuff.
Right.
It's just that you have something labeled something, but you're not actually doing it. You're
Right.
doing some of it. 10% maybe is to do it, and then the rest is just I'm running money around in order to do things, right? So we went to the moon with the Apollo budget. Oh, we spent so much on Apollo and that. And then since then, we spent, if you add up all the money spent on defense space and NASA space, then we spent like $3 trillion, right? Because NASA's $25 billion plus about $50 billion for the defense and spy agency stuff.
Right. Right.
And so what we got of that was, space shuttle, expensive space flights, and we got like maybe 50 spy satellites. All the Hubble telescopes, they were keyhole 7. Keyhole 7 was looking down at us. Hubble was looking away.
I see. Okay.
And then they made like 30 of those ones. That's why with the shape it was, that's why it was what it
I
was.
see. I see.
So there's a bunch of this stuff, which is like, we got a bunch of, some communication satellites and a lot of spy satellites and no moon colony, no Mars colony, no cheap space flight until they put some money into SpaceX. So that's, everything needs to be made more efficient and better.
All right, let's
So,
come back. Let's come back full circle.
mhm.
You and I already agreed a little while ago, I think that unless there's some news, significant news, Tesla stock is probably stuck in a range. I'm going to say, maybe you'll agree with me or not agree with me, that there could be a little more downside to the Elon situation in DC. So
Yeah,
we could be going to 360 based on that. And depending on the market, if the market took a crash, you're saying we could go back down to 300. Is that kind of your
that's
analysis?
right.
All right.
That's right.
On the flip side of it, now you're the guy that predicts the future here. So I'm going to turn to
Mhm.
you now as the guy that gets this stuff right. So
Yeah.
on the flip side of it, 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, maybe even sooner, we already saw the bond market come down 10 basis points today. That was a pretty significant move. 2 or 3 weeks from now, the bond market is at 3.75, 3.75%. Mortgages have dropped from 7 to 5.75, 5.8. Car loans, like you just mentioned a minute ago, have dropped from 8 or more down to 6 or 5.5.
Mhm.
And is there a chance that all of a sudden they're doing parades for Elon instead of against him?
Yeah, I think that is possible. It probably needs to get past, like have some really big wins that are undeniable. Um, and also to um, maybe get past some of the chaotic aspects of the
Yes,
changes, right?
that's right.
Because the thing is, they don't want the chaotic aspects to last, right?
No,
Like
they
Trump
don't.
knows the markets want calm and predictability, right? That's why he's pushing so hard to move so fast, is that if you was to drag it out, it would be worse,
Yeah.
right? So it needs to be first 100 days, whatever. So negotiation with Canada, Europe, Mexico, he wants that done in 45 days, right? But he will push on it to get what he wants. And then once that's done, then everyone can be happy again, right? It's like, you know, are we angry with each other? He's, the scene in Tombstone where, Doc Holly's tapping his guns from a guy who's complaining about how he plays poker, right?
Yes.
Are we crossed? Let me put my guns down, and they stab the guy, right? So then once it's done, then okay, now we can be friends again. If you just like, yeah. So that is where we need to get to. We need to get past the negotiation point
Right.
to the point where, okay, now we can be friends again, right? Because it's just like, we had the in the first time there was all the tariff stuff around China,
Right.
and then there was going from the North American Free Trade Agreement to the MCSA, whatever the Mexico Canada Free Trade Agreement thing, right? So then everything was good. Everyone's happy with that, and people want that. But now Trump's saying new negotiation. We have to get that. Once it's done, now we can all be good again.
So what would you take away from the fact that the bond market dropped 10 basis points today and that the VIX went down to like 15.5 or something?
I think the bond market people are making the cold-blooded assessment that all these agencies and cuts are going to happen. That we're going to cut out $1 trillion out of the spending, right? It's going to be like so $50 billion from the USAID gone, um, reductions in staff, offers, all that kind of thing. We're going to get up a few 100,000 people there who retire, be laid off, and then Department of Education is going to go get broken up and go to the states. So all that stuff is going to happen. They see more of it, and then hitting the big ticket items around, Medicaid fraud, all that kind of stuff. So then all that's going to happen, and it will reduce the fraud and the waste and all that kind of stuff. So they think that's a good thing.
So you think this might have been the first day of beginning to believe it?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All
So they
right.
believe it.
I'm hoping that too. I think that is true. There's really no other way to justify a 10. I mean, because the bonds were pushing up against 5. I mean, they were at
Yeah.
4.8, I think,
Mhm.
which was crazy.
Hmm.
And it's the very first time ever in the history of the bond market that the treasuries went up 100 basis point while the Fed was dropping 100 basis points. That has never, ever happened before. So, and not that they go together. They don't. I've looked at this history. They don't go together, but they don't usually go completely in the opposite direction.
The other thing that's happening is that the U.S. is standing up its sovereign wealth fund,
Yeah.
and it's I over $2 trillion,
Yeah.
right? So sovereign wealth fund for Norway, 1.7 trillion,
Right.
70% stocks, and then some level of bonds. But the U.S. already has $4 trillion worth of bonds and T-bills on their
Books.
treasury thing, right? On the books, right? So they don't have stocks, right? So a sovereign wealth fund will be invested in stocks, right? So a $2 trillion purchase over the next year or two, that seems like it could move the stock market up pretty good,
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. All
right?
right. I think we covered everything I wanted to cover today. That was fascinating to me. I hope it was fascinating to you. It's always
Mhm.
great to have Brian Wang on. And
Thank you.
Brian, we will be doing, I think, more stuff this weekend. I forget all the
Yeah.
stuff we're working on, but I think,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we got, I think,
Mega packs, energy, all that kind of stuff.
Gigapack, Robotaxi, maybe even Optimus
Yeah.
coming up this weekend. So as always, it's phenomenal to have you on board.
Yeah.
For those of you who are watching now, I'm going to put a card up. I think I'm going to put a card up. If there's a card up there, just follow it.
Yeah.
And so thanks again, Brian, and to all of you out there. It has been great talking to you.
Thanks.